Hi guys, today we're going to talk about linear drum fills and we will see a combination between two kicks and two snare or toms linear fill. We will work on finding different combinations, how to play it in the right way, how to have the best sound to achieve that kind of very fast drum fill, which in reality it's very easy to do. It's very relaxing. It's a good effect when we want to get like a rest in between blast beats or something that's very tiring. We basically divide the strokes between legs and hands, so that the sound that comes outside is still like a very fast sound. There are many notes composing this linear, composing this fill, but what we're doing really, it's not tiring at all, and so it's a good way of having a rest between blasts. So a very important thing in playing this kind of linear is the distances between the notes and the dynamics between our hand and feet. So I'll give you a quick example of how the fill would sound like, so that you have an idea. So the first thing that we have to pay attention are the distances between the notes, because we don't want to have a kind of like a shuffle fill. This fill has a good effect only if the distances between the notes are even. So the best thing is to start playing very slow and work on the body control. So when it's slow, we're gonna for sure use arms and legs, so in this way. So in this case, I will pay attention to the distances between the notes and coordinating my body to my body motion to keep the spaces even, so that I work on the right sound that I want this fill to have. The second thing, it's going to be the dynamics. So I don't want to play, and I don't want to have the feeling of playing. It's very important to have the right dynamic, which is, for us, it's going to be maybe difficult from the inside because we don't hear exactly how it is outside, but we can kind of get very close to the result that we want. Plus, if we record ourselves, well, of course, that's going to be the best thing, because we can listen from outside how the fill is played, and from there you can decide, maybe the toms I need the toms louder, so I'll increase, I'll hit harder on the toms or whatever it is. Usually the snare comes out very loud and then the toms are a little bit lower, so maybe let's focus on that, let's balance that sound, let's not hit hard on the snare drum and then lower on the toms, but maybe the opposite, let's control the sound on the snare and then hit a little bit harder on the toms. So for example, so that we have a very balanced sound, and we give that effect of many notes played, and that effect of speed that we want to achieve. Another thing that we have to keep in mind is that the more we're going to speed up this kind of fill, the more we're going to use our wrist. We're going to do a wrist motion on the toms. Instead on the kicks, we can still use it like a kind of a phlegm between legs. It's not going to be exactly a phlegm because we don't want to have two separate double stroke sound. I mean, we have to keep the note even, so the best thing is still to keep that distance between the notes even, but when it's very fast, the notes get very close to each other. So, but with our legs, we can still do a leg motion instead on the toms and on the upper part of our body. Since we have to move around, it's difficult to move all our arms, so it's better just to use this kind of approach, this wrist motion approach, and use our arm just to turn, go around our sets. So something like, then combine it with the kicks, of course. So that I can stay relaxed while I do this kind of feel. I kind of play this phlegm with my hands and phlegm with my feet, but don't get me wrong, because they're not phlegms. It's just to give you an idea of the subdivision that you play between your hands and your feet. But it's that kind of feeling, that kind of idea. Just again, don't make the notes too much like close between the hands and the feet, and leaving space between the two things. So keep the notes very even, which is, in my opinion, it's the hardest thing of this fill. And it's a fill that if it's not played very accurately, it's going to lose the effect that we want to give. Another way that we can play this kind of fill is using only one hand on the toms and the snare. So something like, so this can be added to, I don't know, maybe we're doing accents or we're keeping time on a cymbal or on something, and we can add this double stroke kind of feel, or just, you know, to make it look better. Of course, you might not reach the same speeds that you would do with two hands, but in case the speed allows you to play it this way, it looks good. You can, you know, use it somehow, either combine it with something else that you're playing, or again, to make it look a little bit more special, since it's quite an easy feel. In this case, what I do to play, to have a good sound and to keep a good dynamic and a good balance between my kicks and my hand, is I use the push-pull technique to when I go around the set, so that I can still have a lot of power on both strokes, and I don't lose like hit very hard the first stroke and then lose the second one, and something like this. So something like, so it can also be used, you know, in different ways. I put it in the fill section so that it makes sense. It comes out as a fill, but then of course you can use it as a groove, as anything you want. But it's a good combination. It's a good it gives a good effect. So again, it sounds like a lot of notes being played, but it's not really like physically hard to play it. So, and of course you can do the same thing then with your left hand. So you can, you know, get creative. And of course we then can play the same thing with only one foot, which gives a different dynamics to the strokes, so maybe that gives another effect, and so it would sound something like. So for the foot technique, on the single, when I use the single foot, I use the slide technique, so that I have a lot of power on both strokes, exactly like with my hand, instead of the heel toe, which does not have the same kind of dynamic on the second stroke especially. So for that reason I use the slide technique, and then of course you can also play one foot and one hand at a time, so same thing with the left hand. Once again, you can get creative using just two limbs, so one hand and one foot, and then with the other you can either work on a pattern between your free hand and free foot. You can do whatever, you can get creative and come out with many ideas. So again, first part is like more of a body motion, so legs and wrist around the kid. His arm, when you play slow, and then the more you speed it up, it's going to be more on a wrist motion. Then you can use one hand and have the other hand free, or one foot and have the other foot free, one hand and one foot and have one hand and one foot free. So many combinations. Push-pull and slide technique for the double strokes are the best techniques that I in my opinion, to be used, with the ones that I prefer at least. They give me the right sound for this kind of things. Another thing that we can do is shifting the strokes of the fill. So we can start with 2 strokes with the hand and 2 with our feet on a downbeat. So we can move the snare on the upbeat, so playing, starting with the foot. Well, starting with the 1 stroke of the snare on the 1, so something like. Or we can start with 1 stroke of kick on the 1, so something like. So we can move this fill around the time and give different effects using always the same combination. And of course, as I was saying before, we can even use more combination that I'm not going to demonstrate, but that you can come up with and write down and do in between, and use as a groove or as a fill. So get creative once you get the technical part down, and try to get as many ideas as possible, so that with the same combination you have a lot of ideas, a lot of different material that you can use in the fills. So remember that when you play this kind of fill, no matter what kind of solution you find, the most important thing is the quality of how you play it. So make sure the spaces between the notes are even, the sound between kicks and snare and toms and floor tom are balanced. You can also go on cymbals. You know, you can apply it, of course, on whatever you prefer, but we have to pay attention to the details. If not, we're not gonna achieve that speed sound, that fast sound that we want to, but it's gonna sound more of a something that falls on the drums, and it's not the effect. It's one of those fills that it can be like great or very bad. There's no way in between. So enjoy your practice, and we'll see you next week with another episode.